we can remember to share that with everybody. But anyway, welcome. I'm glad that you're all here. I hope that you are doing okay. Sally was just talking about how all this work is getting in her way and she can't do other things. And that's true for a lot of us. And we have a lot of things that we want to, I mean, time management is definitely, it's something that you always wish somebody could just tell you how to do it, but it's one of those things that there is no certain way to do it, and there is just no other way to put more hours in the day. So you just have to move that stuff around on your plate the best that you can and try not to let anything fall off. And hopefully you can be redeemed if it does fall off, okay? So I want to get started tonight. I'm not quite sure how long our class will go. I know you have a lot of things to do, so if it ends a little shorter, we'll just take that and run with it. You have a lot of things due, and assignments are starting to sort of just come together from different directions. And so I want you to be careful about making a little checklist week to week. And I'm going to share my screen. One of the things is on your, let me go back. That's not what I want to show you. Hold on just a second. Let's see here. Well, I must have timed out of my class. Let me get back in here. When you go to your Zoom link, you have everything that's due. That weekly assignment is right at the top of your page, and so that's a good way to look at it. Let me see if I can get there real quick. So we're in Zoom week 6, okay? Time's marching right along. And here is your class schedule for this week. So I'm happy to answer any questions for you if you have any. You guys have done a really good job with discussion boards, keeping up with those. I'm missing just a few discussion board 4s. But which was due on Sunday night. So, just keep working on that stuff. Keep, trying to organize your work and get it done as quickly as you can. I don't ever give any late grades for those things because I know that life happens and sometimes you have to put some things in order with your job and with this schedule. And so I don't do late grades. But the thing about that is you want to try to keep up because this doesn't stop. It just keeps coming. These assignments keep coming week to week. And so the further you get behind, the more overwhelming it will be. So looking at this, this week by Sunday night, which would be the 23rd, right? Is that right? 18. Yep, the 24th. 24th is Sunday, right? Okay, so on the 24th, you have the discussion board 5 is due, and you have to interview an AP or some other school disciplinarian. And so that's what you're talking to them about in the interview, is you want to know how they manage discipline. I remember when I was an assistant principal, there was a group of I was in a high school and there were like 4 assistant principals, and we were like in this little suite, and there at the end of the day we had a secretary there, and at the end of the day teachers would come by and they had little write-ups, of all the discipline stuff they wanted to report. Well, sometimes at the end of the day or the next morning there would be a stack that would be 8 inches high, of those reports. And, you know, it would have taken us all day long just to sit and deal with that discipline. So you have to figure out what things need to go back to the teacher that needs to be handled in the classroom. You need to try to communicate that with teachers and support teachers, though, in what they need. And you have to organize your day, because there are more important things to schooling than just dealing with the discipline, although you cannot dismiss dealing with the discipline. So you have to figure out how to manage that time and to take care of what needs to be taken care of, you know, quickly, and what can kind of wait a little bit, and space that out throughout your day. So anyway, talk to your AP or if there's somebody else that does most of the discipline at your school, and see how they manage that time with discipline, what their perceptions are about, you know, how they take care of it. Any difficult situations that they have run into. Some of you have already done some observations with the due process, so that always has to be followed. And so just kind of get their feel on the whole process of disciplining students at your school, and what their perceptions are of that, and ideas about how to cut back on that. And most of your schools have PBIS, sort of see what they feel about that and how that's going from an overall school view. You may not have that kind of information as a teacher in the school, so sort of see what that looks like. So that's what, yes.
If you're not a PBIS school, is it just a code of conduct that you follow?
Yes, it is.
So it would be something that our district would have come up with, or our school would have come up with, or something like that?
Yes, most of the time the district has a code of conduct book, and it's sort of aligned with major infractions, and especially, you know, anything that has to be. Remember, a couple weeks ago we talked about incidents that have to be reported to law enforcement and stuff like that. But it has your due process and the procedures that you're supposed to follow in order to take care of things under the due process and everything, and in line with the district. So look for that, the code. And usually if your district has a code of conduct book, that's one of those things that has to go home with all students at the beginning of the school year. Students have to sign off that they have been given a copy, and that they reviewed it at school, or that the parents sign off that they have reviewed it. So you know, look at those kinds of things. And then your school may have some specific procedures and guidelines for handling discipline just within your school as well. The PBIS part of that is more of the positive behavior thing. PBIS is put into place in your school in order to prevent things happening that must be disciplined. Okay, it's trying to get kids to do the right thing in a positive way, and rewarding those positives, so that you can maybe cut down on the discipline side of things. So, but just talk about that. If you are a PBIS school, talk about how that's working. If you're not a PBIS school, talk about, you know, what does the discipline look like? If the discipline is really, really heavy, then if it's not PBIS, there needs to be some program or something in your school to try to cut down on discipline, because it's impossible to do all of that, you know, if you're dealing with discipline all of the time. It just cuts into the time that you have for instruction and for, you know, things like that, the positive side of schooling. So talk to the people in your school and see what you come up with that. I'll be interested to see those discussions. But that's your discussion board for this week. You have 2 more chapters in your school law book, chapter 6 and chapter 10. I'm going to just give you a few highlights, and I will also post my notes in the Zoom session, in this Zoom 6. I don't think I've done that yet, but I will post my notes in there for you. And you can just it's just some bullet points from those chapters. you're supposed to sort of assess student discipline plans and search and seizure. This is not anything that you have to write about or do, but just sort of in the process of interviewing this assistant principal and everything, look at how much discipline you have, look at what kind of procedures and rules and things that you have in your school, and talk about, you know, is it effective or is it not effective, and so forth. But that's not anything that you don't have to write an assessment of those things. So OMA 3 and 4 are due Sunday night. That means that each one of those tasks are due to be uploaded in your class shell. You should have finished your peer review for 3. You don't have to do a peer review for 4. And when you finish, you know, uploading these 2, and they've been to your these individual tasks have been to Dr. Stedman for review, then you're ready to do your Turnitin assignment. And that means you're going to put OMA 1, 2, 3, and 4 together in one document. And in your internship shell, there under evaluations, there is a drop box there for you to put your Turnitin assignment. So the Turnitin assignment does not come to the class. It will not come to me. It will go to Dr. Stedman in his internship shell. That's where you need to put it. And then he will give you the go-ahead to post it in, to upload it into TaskStream. And then once you get a grade from TaskStream, you're going to screenshot that and send it to me. Okay, you're going to screenshot your grade for the OMA TaskStream and send it to me. All right, so, but all you have to do this week is finish this OMA 3 and 4, okay? Last week, Dr. Zans introduced to you the case study 3, and we're going to talk about that just a little bit, but you need to kind of finish getting that together, because next Tuesday night in our class is when the presentation of those case studies is supposed to happen. So let's—
Dr. Whitaker, I'm
Yep.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Is there a specific place in your shell that the screenshot goes?
I'm going to put that in the assignment Dropbox. It's
Okay.
not in there right now.
Okay, I didn't think I'd seen it. That's why I was asking.
Right, it is not in there. And in fact, a couple of people sent me a note about the Turnitin assignment. And this is the first semester that I haven't had interns and a class. Normally I have both, and I just sort of lump them all together. And Kelsey said, where do we put that? And I was like, oh my gosh, it's not in the shell. And so I stuck it in there. But actually, Dr. Stedman, I think I'm going to put it out to you today, and it does go to the clinical coach. The Turnitin assignment goes to the clinical coach and not to the instructor. So I will put that in the assignment Dropbox so that you have a place to put that screenshot. And I think that'll just be a little better than sending it by email. So I'll put that in there, and then you'll have a place to put that. And that is because I want to keep up with what you're doing with that, and I don't I don't have access to your TaskStream account. So that's how we do that. Instructors don't have that. All right, so let's talk just a minute about what you need to be doing with this case study 3. The case studies are kind of a new piece in our class. I think they're going to be very interesting, and I think that our discussion and our collaboration about that will teach you a lot of things. So as it was introduced to you last week, you have the case study, and you have a direction sheet for the study. And you need to follow that. You have 4 questions you were supposed to address at the end of that little narrative. And then talking about how you could address bullying and cyberbullying.
Dr. Whitaker, I can't hear you at all. There's a lot of background noise somewhere.
Okay.
Somewhere. I can't hear anything you're saying.
Okay. Can all of you just mute your microphone? And at any time that you need to stop me and that you need to speak, just unmute your microphone. But if everybody will just mute, that'll cut out all background noise. Okay, so what I was saying is, as that was introduced to you last week, the case study, you have a direction sheet that you're supposed to be following that tells you that those 4 questions that were at the end of the narrative, that you were supposed to address those 4 questions. And you're also supposed to talk about how you would minimize bullying and cyberbullying, as those 2 things might go hand in hand with the situation that's presented in the case study. So talk about how you would address that. Now, just like the discussion boards, we don't want you to just write a paragraph or to think, just talking off the top of your head. Well, here's what I would do. We want you to be fully aware of the legal ramifications of incidents like this, because I think one of the slides that Dr. Zayon shared with you last week, she said that sometimes as a classroom teacher, you might be able to give your opinion about something, but as the leader of the school, you're not going to be able to just do that. You're going to have to make decisions, and you're going to have to act in regards to all legal ramifications and so forth. So for every person you make happy in leadership, there's going to be somebody you make unhappy. And so you're going to have to follow a path of doing the right thing and keeping the best interests of children in mind as you do that. And you're going to have to remove maybe your personal opinions and those types of things as you make those decisions. So always reach out to other leaders in your district when you're trying to deal with some things like that. Don't think that you just have to figure this out on your own. It's happening to other people too, other principals in your district, or most districts have an attorney and so forth. You can discuss things like this with people in those positions, and you can do that. That could be part of your presentation if you all want to do that in your different districts. If you have an attorney in your district that you want to speak to about this particular case, and kind of see what their take on that is. But also going back to your chapter 5, because it's really most of the information is right there at the beginning of chapter 5 in the first 2 or 3 pages, that gives you some clear definitions of things that you need to be looking at for that case study. So when you are putting together your information for the case study, just remember that you need to have something to back up what you're saying. It can't just be what you're thinking off the top of your head. We've really advised you to do that with all of your discussion boards, to refer back to the reading and so forth, because that's where those discussion boards are based on these chapters that you're reading. We want to make sure that you are taking that information and being able to put it into a practical sense of what you're going to be doing. So do that also with this case study, because that will make it, that will make you a strong case. And so the beauty of this is going to be next week, we're going to meet separately. Okay, Dr. Zayon's students are going to be meeting with her, and my students are going to be meeting with me. And we have, in each class, there are 3 groups of 4 students. And so the 3 groups are going to present. So you should really make sure that your presentation is not more than 15 minutes, okay? Try to have it right around 15 minutes, but that's going to take most of our class time to be able to do the presentations and to have a little collaboration. And I think what's going to be interesting is to see, of course, all the groups are going to have some things that are going to be the same, the information that you find, but then you can bring in things that different perspectives from different groups might be a little bit different. That'll be interesting for us to learn from all of that, to learn how different groups are, sometimes situations like are presented in this case study. That might be handled differently, like in a big city school versus a little rural school, okay? And so that, and all of you are in different locations, so that should add to the information that we share together. But you want to make sure that you're following the legal ramifications there, and that you are, making solid decisions in the best interest of children. So that is the case study. Now, if you're not able to be in class next Tuesday to do the presentation, we're going to give you some flexibility to work with that, because we know that you have a lot of things and sometimes it's impossible for you to be here in the class. That's why we always record it and tell you that, you know, if you can't make it to the class, I think it's best to get it firsthand, but if you can't make it to the class, you do have the option of being able to look at the recording. So if group A has 4 people and say one person out of that group cannot attend the class, then group A, when it's your turn to present in the class next Tuesday, the person that cannot be in class needs to record their part of that discussion. So if you're using a PowerPoint and you say that the first person is going to do 3 slides and the second person is the one that's not here and they're supposed to do the next 3 slides, then that person needs to record their section of the presentation. So you can do it like that, or you could decide to get your whole group together and record your 15-minute presentation together sometime before next Tuesday, and then we can just present that video in the class. So you can do that either way. If part of the group is in the class and somebody cannot attend the class, now I know there's quite a bit of work that you all are doing, and I have heard from some of you of some issues that are happening among you, that, you know, if somebody, you have your peer reviews, and if somebody doesn't get their work uploaded, then you can't do your peer review because their work isn't in there yet. You personally are never going to be penalized for something that somebody else didn't do, as far as grading goes and everything. But we want to, all of you need, this is a graduate class, and when you become an administrator, there is not going to be anybody standing over your shoulder telling you every move to make. Now, you will have somebody over you at that central office that is giving you some, you know, some things that you have to do, and you'll have deadlines that you have to meet. And you have to figure out how to make that happen, okay? So, but there's a lot of your work that nobody's going to be standing over your shoulder, but yet it's an expectation that you will get it done and that you will do it well. So make sure that you are adhering to those deadlines, so that you don't infringe upon what somebody else needs to do. If you get just a little bit behind, you know, a day or 2 or something like that, communicate with your other person, your review person, and try to get that in there. But like I said, don't worry about that on my end, or Dr. Zayon's, we are not going to give you a late grade because of that, and you're never going to be penalized because of somebody else that's not doing something. But it just makes a few ripples. And, you know, maybe there's somebody else who meets all the deadlines and you're not meeting the deadlines, then, you know, that affects their work. So try to be conscious of that and do a good job. And so the same thing with this presentation on this case study, communicate with the people in your group. And, you know, I'm hoping this is the first time that we've done it, so I hope that it goes well, that we can do those presentations in class. And we're going to just flip back and forth about sharing the screen. And, you know, if you have something that you need to use to present that. So that's how that will go. And so like I said, you got a little flexibility there about how you want to plan it and put it together and present it by Tuesday. But we really want to have all the presentations next Tuesday, because time is marching right on to the next assignment. So be sure that you get some recordings of your group if the group cannot be in the class to present it live next Tuesday night. And that will be both classes. Any questions about that or concerns? Okay, next week, on Tuesday night, you'll do the presentations, and then by the end of next week, you have to write a reflection on the process of doing this case study. So in that, you just have to write, like, I think it's written that you're supposed to do like a little half page to 1 page written about the process. You're not writing about the incident that is in the case study, but you are writing about what you had to do. You know, maybe it was all new to you, or maybe you you've done that before, you followed that procedure, and you're just going to be talking about how you did it and what you learned from that and how the process went. Okay? So any questions about case study 3? Okay, well, we're looking forward to that. I think that it's going to be pretty interesting. I'm thinking that this first case study is something like, I would just hope I didn't have to do that. And there's a lot of things like that happen that you're hoping that, because that's a type of situation that could really blow up fast. And you'd be all in the newspaper and everything before you even know what's happening. So you want to make.
Dr. Whitaker, I do have a question actually about the case study.
Okay.
When I can find case law and that kind of thing that on same-sex people going to proms together, and I mean there's stuff about that.
Uh-huh.
What I can't seem to find is if a student wants, the last part where if a student wants to have a day, like they're suggesting having the diversity day and a day of silence.
Right.
And is that, I can't really find anything about students being able to have it, like have a day, you know? Well, there's something that I should search under specifically to find that?
Well, I'd go back to the beginning of that chapter 5. There's quite a bit of information there. I mean, it's not going to say yes, they can, or no, they can't, but that information is a lot about being able to symbolic expression of students and how that fits into the constitutional rights. And so read through that again and see how you feel that, how that fits with those, having those.
Okay, I was looking for something like protest, like students protesting, I don't know. I just couldn't quite figure out what I was looking for to try to find it. So I'll look back in chapter 5.
Yeah, what you want to look at it, all kinds of things like that. I mean, these students have gone to ask permission to have those days, okay? So that's ultimately going to be up to the leadership of the school to determine whether they can or they can't. But like I said, for every person you make happy, you're going to make somebody unhappy, and you want to be sure that you've got something to back up your decision. I'm telling you, you need to not carry that alone, especially when you are a principal of a school. There's nobody else to ask. If as an assistant principal, you always have your principal in the building that you can ask. Okay, that's where the buck stops, was with that principal. And so they will either help you make the right decision, or they will bear the burden of whatever happens. Okay. That is, I guess, if you are communicating with them. So don't be doing anything like that. I mean, make sure you keep your principal informed of every little thing that you're doing like that, so that they don't get caught blindsided. And it's the same thing with your superintendent. They don't want the newspaper up there, asking questions about something that's happening at your school and they not know anything about it. So you need to be in good communication with the folks at your district office so that you can, make sure that they're helping you make those right decisions and that you're not just hanging out there alone. You want to be sure that everybody's involved with that. And so don't be afraid to do that. They would much rather you call them and discuss that with them than to, end up trying to put out some fires of something, that you handle on your own that, might have some parts to it that you didn't know how or what to do. So at any rate, I could go back to chapter 5. There's a lot of constitutional student rights stuff and how some of that is handled and what the courts have said about some of that. I would go back and look at that a little bit. it's like I said, it's not going to tell you yes they can or no they can't. You're going to have to sort of make that determination based on what you've read there with those rights. And so that's some of the discussion that you're going to have, and discuss, you know, why you're deciding that. All right, so I'm going to, chapter 6 goes back into a little bit more of student discipline, and some of the things that, as you are working with the leadership staff at your school, is that you want, when we're talking earlier about PBIS, how that sort of is to deter so much discipline and to make things more in a positive light. Also, you want to make sure that the policies and procedures that you have in place at your school are specific. Okay, make sure that they're specific, and then that all of those things are uniformly carried out with all students. And punishments need to be appropriate to the offense and circumstance, and you need to always do the due process. So due process, there should be a specific set of procedures to follow through due process. But two of the main things for that is that parents have to be notified of the charges against their child, and that can be oral or written, and there has to be a hearing. And at that hearing, the student that is being charged must be allowed to tell their side of the story. So at the hearing, you as the administrator, you are going to be providing the evidence that you have put together as to what happened, witnesses, you know, and whatever, maybe you have it on videotape and different things like that. You're going to try to put your pieces together, and you're also going to hear from that student again. And you can get the statement from that student on the day that the incident happens, but then the hearing is normally the next day. So that's part of that due process, and due process covers substantive and procedural, which means that you are you're going to be fair, that the rules that you have are fair just within themselves, and then procedural means that they're going to apply to every student the same. And that too can get very interesting. So anyway, make sure that proper notices of the charges are given and that there is an impartial hearing held. And then there is, as far as suspensions go, there is a 10-day limit. And so as a assistant principal or a principal of a school, you are only allowed to make suspensions up to 10 days. If it is a big infraction, and by that code of conduct book that is put out by your district, there would be some things in there that would be listed as, you know, a possible consequence could be a long-term suspension, which would be 10 days or more. And but there's a little bit more to the process if you're going to take a student out of school for 10 days. And but otherwise, whether it's 1 day, 2 day, or 3 day, that's pretty much left up to you as the administrator and considering all of the circumstances. But there again, you want to sort of have some strong guidelines so that you are being fair and consistent with all students. You have to balance school safety and student rights, and there's a lot of that is, some of that is in chapter 5 and some more of that in chapter 6. And you want to, a lot of our schools have the presence of law enforcement in the school, but it's still, even though they're there and sometimes they are involved in some discipline issues that happen at the school, still the school has a responsibility for handling that discipline, and you can't just let law enforcement handle it. They will handle their part of it, but you have a part to handle as well. Then you know, a positive school climate is probably the best avenue to like have a prevention of violence in your school or prevention of disciplinary issues in your school. And you want that climate to be one where communication is a key component, and that you have those clear and specific rules. And if you have PBIS, you have those positive things that are going to impact student behavior, and make sure that you keep up with that. PBIS is one of those things that sometimes, one teacher is very vigilant to recognize students and give them the rewards for their behaviors, and the next teacher sort of like acts like they don't have time for that, and they're not really vigilant about that. So it's one of those things that you kind of have to keep talking about in your school, and trying to get everybody on board as much the same as possible, so that it is a fair and consistent program in your school. We've talked about safety plans, and back in the very beginning of this semester, we talked about how important it was to have a comprehensive safety plan, and not only have it, but make sure that everybody knows it and that it's practiced. And so if any kind of crisis were to happen, that it would be there. And then there's a little bit of information in there about zero tolerance policies. While that sounds really great, they are very hard to enforce. And so a lot of times they can't be really enforced, and you might not have anything to back that up if you tried to force it. So exercising professional judgment is a part of your job as an effective leader. So those are just kind of some of the highlights in Chapter 6. And Chapter 10 is all about search and seizure. And I would just say to you that there are two things to think about there. That as a school official, to do any kind of a search, you have to have just a reasonable suspicion. Okay, a reasonable suspicion that a student has something that they shouldn't have, or whatever has happened. Somebody stole a cell phone, or you have to have a reasonable suspicion, and you can do a search. Make sure that you're just very cautious about doing searches of any kind. Law enforcement has to have probable cause, so they have to have a little bit more than you do to search that. But always have witnesses with you. Have same sex that you have of the students that are involved. And never ever do any kind of strip searches. Even if your district says that you can, do not do it. Electronic searches, if you're trying to find something that's on a student phone, you need to get them to show that to you, rather than you taking the phone and handling it and going through their phone. So be careful about that. The same thing with lockers. Lockers are school property, but what's in that locker belongs to the student. So, if you want to see what's in that student's locker, you need the student to go through their stuff. Don't pull their book bag out and you start going through their book bag. You have them to empty the book bag and to do that. Don't put your hands on that kind of stuff. So just really know what your district guidelines are and the policies for searches, but I would be very, very careful about all of that. And when in doubt, don't. So I will send you those bulleted information, those notes from Chapter 6 and Chapter 10 to kind of help you with that. And with that in mind also, we're going to, tonight I want to also introduce to you Case Study 1. But before I do that, this is the resources that are under week 6. And so here is DPI's PBIS website, and there's these are some, this is Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools incident reporting and their code of conduct book, and a conference presentation. So if your school doesn't have, if your school district does not have a code of conduct book, you might want to look and see kind of what one looks like there. So this is just an example. And then you know, if you're a school, if you're not a PBIS school, that might be, you might want a little bit more information about that and see how that works. And, you know, even if you don't become a PBIS school, you could take some information from that program and, you know, sort of do your own guidelines in your school. So with that, case study 1, you have that information in the shell, and it is another incident where you're going to have to determine how to handle a situation in the school. And there are a couple of things in your directions. You're going to, the way you're going to do all of these case studies will be the same. Okay, you have the same group. You're going to have to do a presentation on the case study, and you will do a reflection at the end on the process. So all of that is the same thing about, you know, when it's time to present that, everybody needs to be present, or you can do a recording of your presentation prior to the class that is due, if you need to go that route. So all of those instructions that we have given you for the case study 3 about how to do it will be the same, okay? But case study 1 is going to be a little, I mean, it's just a different situation, but it stems around cheating, okay, and how you're going to handle that. So there's a lot of special things that are in that situation that you have to address and how you're going to handle it. And sometimes you have to be fair and consistent. And you have to, if you say you're going to, you know, if you say this is going to be the punishment for this, then you have to kind of follow through on that. You have to, I mean, there sometimes is some gray areas in the circumstance, but you got to be able to back it up so that it doesn't come back to you, because the biggest group of talkers are those parents out there in your school. And so, you know, and they're going to talk about how you handle things, and you want to be known as an administrator that is fair and consistent, and that you follow the guidelines that you have published and sent out there, and so forth. And so you're going to use chapter 6 in finding the information that you want to be your research for this case study 1. And also there is a document that's called the Role of the Principal, and it is under week 4 in the Zoom session. So when you go over here to your Zooms, it's under week 4, the Role of the Principal. And it tells you that in your directions for case study 1. So in that Role of the Principal, there are 4 ethical paradigms that you're going to look at as to how you will handle that. And you know, so the rich parent's child and the child who doesn't even have a parent, you know, when you're trying to discipline a child over a specific activity, you know, it's got to be the same. So you've got to be, you can't, you know, jeopardize that too much there. And that's a little bit what this case study is about, is how you're going to handle some of those, some different parents, okay, and situations. You'll see that when you read this case study 1. So you've got a lot on your plate for this week. You're finishing up case study 3. So if you get a chance later just to read through case study 1, you're already reading chapter 6, which is going to be based from. You can use the other, that Bulldog 1, you know, to find other research. You can talk to people in your district, to your principal, to your attorneys, and different people like that, to see how other people have handled situations like this. So those are some pieces that you can put together, but you might want to really mostly do that work next week on that. And we're also coming up on a spring break, which I need to share that with you real quick. We noticed this week that there is a little bit of a, I don't know, if I don't know if it's an error or it's just the way it was put together, but this weekly schedule was given to us, and it's saying that we are going to celebrate spring break March 4th through the 10th, and so there are no classes and there's no assignments due or anything that week, March 4th through the 10th. But on your Gardner Webb website, it says that spring break is this week, the 11th through the 17th. So I don't think that that's going to affect you all very much. Dr. Lamb has told us today that we need to observe this schedule as it is. So we'll do our presentations of case study 3. You got a week off that you have no extra assignments or anything. So if you're caught up, take a break. If you're not, it's a catch-up week, okay? And then week 8, we're going to actually do the presentations for the case study 1. So you have this next week that you can work on that some, but just please note that we are going to observe spring break this week, March 4th through the 10th, and there will be no class and no assignments due that week. You're going to start working. You've got case study 1 here being introduced. You're going to start working on that, and you're actually going to present it when we come back on week 8. Okay, any questions about any of that stuff that I've covered so far? So the last thing that I wanted to cover with you a little bit is your SCIP. The SCIP is the Stakeholder Involvement Plan, and I know that Dr. Zayance introduced that to you last week, and her graphic on that PowerPoint was really good, I think. So you are supposed to be, getting started with that. Actually, it's on this week to introduce, but we wanted to go ahead and sort of put it out there. You do have the instructions, and that's in, part of your syllabus or part of this artifacts and your task stream requirements and the schedule for that here. You can find the rubric and also the instructions. And so she was saying that she really, we really want you to read both of those and make sure that you're covering all of the points in there. But basically in task 1 of the SCIP, you're going to do a needs assessment. You're going to sort of analyze what communication looks like in your school and your community. So you want to look at how does the school from inside the school communicate to outside, to the parents and everybody, and how are the parents communicating with teachers and with the people within the school. So, you have a lot of different things. You have those Connect Ed calls, and, you have parent-teacher conferences. You have certain days set up. You have teachers. You might have some, expectations that teachers are contacting parents or sending good notes. They're sending, setting up conferences at different times. So whatever, you're going to really talk about what all that looks like in your school, from within your school to the outside, and from the external stakeholders to the inside. How does that work? What does that look like in your school? And then you're going to sort of do a needs assessment about where are there gaps? Are there some gaps there between that communication where things might not be working so well? And so for task 1, you have 2 prompts, okay? And you have those little checkbox under your directions, and I would use those checkboxes as headers in my narrative, okay? So that gives you a lot of organization to what you're writing in that narrative. So for task 1, you have 2 prompts, and you have these little checkboxes. So like prompt 1 says a background description of the setting. And you've used that before, so that could be cut and pasted. But you put the background of your school setting, where you're located, what the demographics are, all of that kind of stuff. And then you're going to have a clear statement of the purpose of the needs assessment. Why are you even doing a needs assessment? So you talk about the whole analysis of the communication, and then you talk about the gaps that you discover and so forth in that. And then a list of the participants. Who's on this team, this school stakeholder involvement plan? You have a team, a stakeholder involvement team. So who's a part of that? And why is Sally a part of that? Why is Christy a part of that? What is their role on that team? So you'll talk about the list of participants on that team, who's going to be deciding what those needs are and what we're going to do about those needs. So talk about those participants and so forth. And then you have an analysis of your findings. So you tell what you found from the needs assessment, what you think the gaps are, and then you're going to have a set of recommendations for the avenues of communication. And you're going to talk about those recommendations in two parts, like short term, like what are we going to do right now to fix any of those things? You know, it might just be a couple of things that you could do. It's really hard sometimes to just change all of the rules in the middle of the road. So once you get a school year started and you find gaps and things, don't let them just wait till next year. Do what you can to fix those things now. But there might be a whole different plan of how we're going to do this that we'll put in place for next year. So those could be some long-term goals that you would set up. And that sort of establishes what your stakeholder communication plan is going to look like. And then prompt 2, you know, you're again that setting and the participants in that analysis, and then the procedures that you use to collect your data, and how did you collect the data? What kind of data did you collect? Did you do a survey or interviews or what you did? And then the recommendations that you would make to the school improvement plan, that would be your short and your long term. So just kind of put that together in that narrative for task 1.
I have a question.
Yes.
I know that we won't be getting an example or a template or anything for this one. So should we set it up the same way that the other papers have been set up, with all the purpose, the description, and the prompts, or do we just put our information?
Yes, you should set it up like the prompts. That's what I'm saying for task 1, because those little check boxes in your directions, they match pretty clearly with the rubric, and that's a perfect way to organize that first task, is to just sort of use those for headings.
What I'm talking about is, if you look on like the OMA, the very first task,
right,
at the opening page, it'll say purpose, and it's been cut and pasted straight from our handbook. Do we need to set that up that way in our paper, or do we just type our information?
I would maybe.
The reason I asked, Dr. Lamb just says that it makes sense to the reader if the information is very clear.
It is. Most of your readers, we've been doing a lot of this, but that's why, like the background information, I know that you've done that for some of your other artifacts, but it could be a different reader that's reading some of your information on this particular artifact, and so they haven't read all of your other stuff, or we have so many students that you can't really remember what that is. So it is important that it be there. Your background information isn't going to change, though, from one artifact to the next, probably, and so it is that little piece is something that could be cut and pasted. But I understand what you're saying. Should you put in there the directions, the purpose,
yes,
and the prompt, and all of that? And I would put that in those individual tasks.
Okay.
You can either leave it or take that out when you put all of the 4 tasks together in your for your final narrative. It would be okay to take those directions out of there, but I would leave that in there for these tasks. I would set that up the same way. Yep. Any other questions about task 1? We just want to be sure that you have this information kind of ahead. Some of you kind of move ahead of others, and so we wanted to make sure that you sort of have that together. Task 2 is talking about that plan that you set up in task 1. How are you going to fund that? And not only money, but human capital. How are you who's going to do all those things that you're saying need to be done? Who's going to be responsible for doing those, and what kind of funding, or if there's any kind of resources that you need in order to fill that gap. how are you going to pay for that stuff? So you need to look at funding both fiscal and your human capital. So,
I couldn't get my thing unmuted fast enough. I do have a question about task 1.
That's okay.
My school has been working on a communication plan and implemented something at the beginning of the year.
Okay.
I'm not sure how welcoming they would be to do something else on top of what they were already doing. Can I just kind of evaluate how that's going?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you can. So you would analyze, I mean, you would present all of that, and talk about, your analysis would be of that plan that you have.
Okay.
And the same thing, I mean, and a lot of you might have, all of you are doing some kind of communication from, inside to outside and vice versa. So whether you have a formal plan or not, there is communication going on or a lack of communication going on. And that's what you're analyzing in task 1 and finding out if there are any gaps. So actually that'd probably be perfect if your school has put together a formal plan for you to do that analysis. Now you're getting closer to the end of the year. So how's it been going?
Okay.
Are there still some gaps that, we're missing in that plan? Are there some adjustments that need to be made to it?
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So that, I just wanted to kind of touch on task 1 and task 2. As you begin to wrap up that OMA, those will be that'll be the next 2 tasks that you work on. And so, if you follow this weekly schedule, you don't have to get way ahead, but if your personal schedule or your school schedule, if you know that you're going to have a week coming up that you're not going to have time to do this, that some of you may be looking at that to work ahead a little bit, but we just want to make sure that you have the information you need. And if you are in a situation that you're ready to work on task 3 and you've got questions about that before we talk about that in class, then you just, reach out to us, because we're very happy to help you and to help you move along at your own pace with that. All right, so we are just about the end of an hour. So does anybody have any questions about any of the things we've talked about tonight? It's been a little bit more me talking, but it's quite a few things in here. And so I just want to be sure that everybody is, up to speed on what those expectations are. Everybody good? All right, well, good luck with your work this week, and I hope you have a great week, and I will see my class next Tuesday, and Dr. Zayon's students will be meeting with her next Tuesday. And we'll do our presentations and just collaborate and talk about those and move through that process, okay? All right, if you need me for anything, reach out in texting or email, okay? Have a great evening.
Good night.
Turn this recorder off. Stop sharing.